All right, big welcome to everybody. This is Dispersing the Fog, episode 49 on February 22nd, 2026. Paul, a date that might not be known in the future as the date that our podcast aired, but maybe the date that, man, that gold medal game this morning, that was that was quite a game. You watched it, I assume.
Yep, I watched it,
Yeah.
and the Americans were very fortunate to survive that game.
The Canadians really could have won that, 5-1 or something. Two breakaways, Macklin Celebrini and Connor McDavid, the best player in the world, and then two empty net goals or two empty net opportunities. Goalie got a paddle on one, Hellebuck, and then the other one, Nathan McKinnon, who's just a deadly scorer, misses a wide open net.
On another one, Charlie McAvoy, the defenseman, took one right in the gut,
Yeah.
went past the goalie, and he was standing behind the goalie.
So that's anyway, it's a tough thing. I mean, the whole much of the country would have been watching, getting up early to watch, and thus must much of the country is probably in a bit of a funk right now.
And you know the way out of this?
What's that?
Because the Americans won, we should put 25% tariffs on everything that comes from the United States.
Well, so Paul, we maybe won't start right there, but that was a big, that's probably the biggest legal news of the week. We tend to focus on Canadian stuff, but of course, the U.S. Supreme Court on Friday ruled that the Trump tariffs, the 10% across the board, 50% in some cases, emergency tariffs that he put in place, tried to put in place because he was trying to, counter the fentanyl crisis and the crime crisis. U.S. Supreme Court says, nope, you cannot do that. It has to come through Congress. So, as I predicted, by the way, a few weeks ago after listening to some of the submissions. So, the U.S. Supreme
Oh,
Court has a backbone.
yay, but do the Republicans? My bet, the best Trump story of it is the one from this morning, where he now, he woke up, or maybe never slept, and said he's sending a hospital ship to Greenland
Yeah.
to help out there. And the hospital ships are in dry dock, being repaired and won't be out till July.
Yeah. And Greenland said no thanks anyway. Nobody asked for these things. Like, it's just bizarre stuff coming from the White House pretty much every day, it seems. Uh, so,
America the beautiful.
yeah, well, they get the gold medal, but then they're stuck with their president. One of the Supreme Court justices said just in that decision uh, that, and this kind of harkens back to some of the pandemic laws too that were brought in very quickly. Said because laws must earn such broad support to survive the legislative process, they tend to endure. So things that just get imposed or pushed on, like the tariffs or whatever, they don't tend to endure. Anyway, so that was the big legal news in a way of the week, but lots of other stuff going on. By the way, just back to the Olympics for a second. Uh, Disappointing Olympics for Canada overall, I'd have to say. No real, uh, emerging stars jumping up. There was some wins, of course, but nothing crazy. But I'll tell you what I was watching for, Paul. Watching the Olympic snowboarding competition, looking to see, which sort of non-medalist might become the next Ryan Wedding. Trying to predict, which one of these guys might become an international crime lord at some point. Any
You're
picks?
a funny guy. I mean, my take is it's sort of I've been watching this for many years, having once been a sports editor and covered the Olympics in the past. Um, One thing is the way Canada selects its athletes. There's a good article the other day about the American women's team were all basically under 24. And in Canada, it was like, oh, well, you've done this in the past, therefore you have a right to be here. Because we don't want to offend anyone and have the best there. We want to have the ones that we're not going to hurt their feelings there.
Yeah.
And that works against us. Instead of having the best and a meritocracy, we go on past record, friends, and associates, basically. And that's the Canadian way. Why do you lose? You're not picking the best. and you're not we're not sort of supporting the programs to the level they need to be supported.
Man, a few times they did these graphics about comparing the Canadian investment in sport to like the Norwegians and the Austrians and all these others, and it's just not even close. The bobsled, like the German bobsled designed by BMW or Mercedes, one of them, and ours are just sort of off the shelf piece of garbage, right? In comparison. So,
Yeah, and
yeah.
it's the Canadian way. We strive for mediocrity. That's basically how the country operates. And we don't want to offend anyone because especially the rich and powerful, which I'll get into in a bit. And the second take on the Olympics is, as I said before, they've got sports there that, the only thing I watched in the Olympics was the championship game today.
Oh yeah.
Although I was sort of intrigued by ski joring.
The
Did you
what?
watch the ski joring?
I'm not sure. What's
Where
the?
you're on skis, you get pulled by a horse or a tractor or dogs or whatever.
Come
That
on
was a
now.
sport too. I guess you missed it.
I missed it, but the one, okay, I'm not sure if that's a real sport still, but the one I did
They've been
see,
doing it since like 1908 or
it
something
certainly
like
sounds
that.
like it should be. The other one I saw was they, basically run on skis up the hill, take the skis off, put them on your back, run upstairs, and then ski down the other side of the hill. And it looked like a lot of fun, but they're just sort of making stuff up at this point. So I don't know. A lot of the yeah, rich people's Winter Olympics.
Yeah,
Really
it's
seems
like,
like it'd be a nice Olympics to attend, I will say. These Milano, Cortina, the village looks like it's not crowded. It's not like London or Rio or, some of these places where
and
you'd be overwhelmed.
really good food.
Looks good. So,
Funny line about
yeah,
Italian food. A
yeah.
couple of years ago, I was at a trade show in Toronto, and there's this woman there who is from North Macedonia, sort of North Greece. And she was complaining about Italians, saying, I hate Italians. They think their food is better than anyone else's. And I said, well, I got bad news for you. They're right.
Yeah, they're kind of known for
I
that,
said,
aren't they?
people don't go out for North Macedonian food. I
No, they
mean,
do not.
no,
No.
it's so yeah, it'd be good to go to the Olympics in Italy.
Yeah. But yeah, there's lots going on. By the way, folks, we've got favorite one of our favorites coming back today, Dave Moore, a guest who's been on a couple of times. That's got some interesting stuff to tell us today as well. So we'll look forward to bringing Dave in here after a few minutes. But always lots to talk about. Paul, where do you want to start?
Well, just getting these two letters here that I want to get into Melissa
Yeah.
Ellsworth from last week. One of our readers sent a note to CTV complaining about their coverage of Lisa Banfield.
Oh yes.
And Nikki Lewis passed this on to me. And, she wrote this letter and got one back from CTV, basically saying, "Oh, we did a good job, and we went with the evidence, and the evidence showed Lisa Banfield was a victim of domestic violence, et cetera, et cetera. And we were thoroughly professional in this job." It's an example of sophistry. You know what sophistry is?
Oh yes, the sophists.
Sophist, it's making an argument based, a superficial argument that is actually unsound or reasoning that is used to deceive.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they're doing. They're saying, well, we went with the evidence, but they never looked at all the evidence. They cherry picked the evidence to support their case. Outrageous.
The sophists versus the actual philosophers of Greece, the ones that knew what they were doing. You can make a yeah, clever, well-framed argument, but it's not based on anything. It's
Yeah,
not
that's
based on
right.
reality.
Oh, we went over the evidence. No, you didn't go over the evidence because any evidence that sort of besmirched Lisa Banfield's story was ignored, and it's all there.
Another excerpt was in the Walrus magazine this
Yeah,
week's too. Somebody sent me the part about her going to do the reenactment with
yeah.
Corporal Rose Berthiaume and Sergeant Vardy, and anyway, all of that story. So
And the second one was one of our audience, Michael Keefe, uh, asked the RCMP about comms 006361, which we talked about several weeks ago, which strongly suggested that Gabriel Wortman's neighbor in Portapic, Peter Griffin, was an RCMP agent.
yeah,
And so he sent this, request in, and he got basically a non-answer back, essentially saying they couldn't find it,
couldn't
this
find
document.
the document. Well, we
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can give it to them.
yeah. We can give it to him, but he was asking for their, some clarification on it,
Okay.
and they just basically sent him back a non-answer.
Yeah. Well, no surprise there. I don't.
So that tells us we're
Yeah.
right,
Well,
basically.
yeah. I mean, if they had something to refute it, they probably would. I mean, maybe not to him, but you would think now that it's out in the public that they would.
And
They had a
I
clear way to refute it that they would.
and Michael Keefe said he sent notices to all kinds of media across the country about this document, and no one's got back to him yet. Because God, they don't want to have to tell a story that defeats their previous stories. Then they'd have to explain to their readers how they got it wrong, or their
Yeah.
audience, not just their readers, because a lot of these people, I suspect, can't read nowadays. So
Yeah. Well, surprising we're in the minority of people that want to go out and actually look for what's true and just describe that regardless of how it might make people feel.
then last week we had on Melissa Ellsworth, former corrections officer who's applied for and received its granted maid, which she said she's going to take up just before her birthday in June. And the response was pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, like in our audience, one couple in our audience who lived in Truro volunteered to pick her up in Cape Breton, which is like what, two and a
Oh,
half hour drive from there,
easily.
3 hour drive,
Yes. Yeah.
and then come all the way back and drive her to Halifax for a doctor's appointment, and then pick her up and drive her home again. Melissa had other arrangements lined up, but I congratulate them and thank them for doing that.
Yeah.
And another audience member said because Melissa couldn't get uh, the marijuana, cannabis that she needed, the strengths that she needed, this fellow offered to grow it for her to her specific requirements.
Yeah. Well, hey, this is what can happen. And one of the reasons I think it was good of Melissa to come on the show was to just put that out there and you never know what kind of good Samaritan's going to come along and make an offer like that. So that was, I mean, good on those people and others too if they're thinking along the same lines. I mean, she's gonna need the help.
And I didn't realize that how much was going on, that this whole Workmen's Compensation Board issue of refusing to listen to doctors and overturning sort of medical recommendations, ignoring them, and essentially forcing people into MAID. We talked about it last week. People committing suicide because of dealing with the Workmen's Compensation Board. MP Garnet Genuous, I think that's how you pronounce his name, who's the shadow minister for employment, introduced a bill about 2 weeks ago, Bill C-260 in Parliament, an act to prevent coercion of persons not seeking medical assistance in dying. And what he was saying in this bill is that essentially government agencies and agencies like the Workmen's Compensation Board are forcing people to seek MAID because they won't give them the assistance they require.
Yeah. I mean, effectively, when you read the doctor's report from Melissa Ellsworth, that is exactly what was happening, with they had covered the stronger version of the cannabis that she was seeking, then she wouldn't have sought MAID. I mean, and she wouldn't have needed it. But here it is. Now, I think in Melissa's case, she didn't allege, I don't think that anybody suggested it to her or encouraged her to do it. But if the system is effectively pushing you in that direction, then what's the difference? But I think with this bill, C 260, is designed to at least prevent them from bringing it up, anybody on the bureaucratic side, because you can see that being a slippery slope. All of a sudden, there's a funding cut, and treatment's not there, or the staffing's not there, or something, and all of a sudden, overwhelmed bureaucrats are like, "Have you thought about MAID? Like, you could just do this one instead. I don't know, we can't help you, but you could do this." Uh, that'd be dangerous.
And final point on this today, Melissa Ellsworth said she planned to visit Dr. Rod Wilson, who is the New Democratic
Yeah,
Party critic for health and wellness, seniors, and long-term care. He's formerly a nurse, a doctor, 30 years experience, a healthcare executive. And when she showed up for the meeting, he wasn't there. His assistant said there was a miscommunication. And Melissa thought the miscommunication was she alerted him before she got to the meeting to watch our podcast with her on it.
yeah.
And once he saw it, I guess he suddenly forgot to have the meeting.
Really? Why would
Yeah,
that? Why would that prevent him? Wouldn't that say, okay,
you
well,
would think.
I need to deal with this thing?
But he was a healthcare executive. He's a critic, but he's also been on the other side. And like many politicians, he calls himself a proven leader and advocate for improving healthcare. But then he doesn't want to go see Melissa Ellsworth because she's saying bad things about the Workmen's Compensation Board, like a lot of other people are doing.
The dilemma for the NDP, Paul, is this one. On the one hand, okay, Dr. Wilson could be helping out Melissa Ellsworth and many people like her, but in order to do so, he needs to be critical of Workers' Compensation Board and the unionized employees that work there. And that is a real dilemma for the NDP when they're looking for support. To me, the calculation is simple. You take the bigger population of people that were getting services, get it through workers' compensation, and that's just the right thing to do anyway.
Yeah. And eventually, Melissa said to get the dosage of marijuana she needs to relieve the pain that she has, the verifiable pain that she has, and is documented in her medical records, someone had to take her to the res.
Yeah.
And she was able to get what she needed there.
So, Paul, it sounds like some NDP members are watching us. We know from previous guests that I think the RCMP headquarters in Dartmouth is watching the show. I know lots. You wouldn't. It's funny. You must get this experience as well. I'll get people just coming up to me. I really like your podcast, and I'll be like, oh, I'm kind of surprised sometimes. A nice lady at the gym the other day brought it up. Took the earbuds out. Hey, just wanted to tell you. So, but I think workers' compensation must also be watching, or might also be, because Melissa Ellsworth got a letter right after
Yeah.
being on the podcast from workers' compensation. I guess it was I read the letter. It was sort of reminding her of what her benefits and entitlements
Yeah.
are. Well, it was kind of an
But saying it,
unprompted letter, I think.
but writing it like, look at the good things we're doing, but they're not changing anything. And they've cut down the dosage of the THC in the cannabis to their acceptable levels. Not what works, but what we don't want you getting high now, dear. And if the pain's too much, you can always go with MAID.
Well,
It's
it's crazy.
sick.
And just to remind people, and we went through this last week, but Melissa Ellsworth tried 20 other treatments before, all of the quote unquote legitimate treatments before going to this. And hey, it's legal by the way too. And that's the only thing that seems to work. So we'll certainly be following that and keeping in touch with Melissa to see what her journey looks like going forward. Um, Paul, we've got a few other stories. Where do you want to go next? There's this human rights case out of BC, actually not maybe disconnected to the Tumbler Ridge situation. By the way, Tumbler Ridge, we heard this week that the shooter had an open AI account, which had been banned. So that seemed concerning. There was some questions as to whether the people behind this social media AI platform should have alerted police. We don't know all the details yet, but there seems to be some questions being asked about that. Privacy versus public safety on the line there.
Oh, well, I don't, there's I watched a bit of the testimony from Mark Zuckerberg today on a case about the problems caused by social media, and he said there's no problem. They haven't done anything to encourage people to do bad things or record bad things. They're just totally vigilant.
Well, if you can't believe the billionaire guy that owns the platform that seems to be having very few guardrails, who can you believe? Uh,
Yeah, they made $1 billion and they turned into pirates. Go
yeah,
figure.
yeah. Uh, a
They were there to
strange.
make the world a better place, eventually for them.
So, Paul, these two things seem to be connected. There's this story, the Tumbler Ridge story about the OpenAI account that was banned, and nobody wanted to bring that up or report it to anybody. And then we've got this other story this week of Barry Neufeld, a school trustee at in Chilliwack, British Columbia, just got hit with a $750,000 fine for questioning. He accused of transgender denialism and all the sort of usual things that go, or there's no such thing as all these gender identities and such. He's he's not a teacher. He's not in charge. He's a trustee. It sounds like a board member of like a school board member. But $750,000. So are we shutting down? To me, the connection seems to be we can't talk about any of this stuff. We just can't. Or else you'll get fined or you'll get shut down one way or another, and that doesn't seem like a healthy place to be.
Well, no kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no debate when there should be debate. I mean, these are serious issues about screwing around with people's bodies at a time when the bodies are developing, their brains are developing, and allowing them to be sort of because you want them to feel good and you don't want to traumatize them and allow them to use all kinds of drugs and surgery, whatever, to change their bodies to a point where they're not even sure who they are now and then who they're going to be in the future until they grow up and everything sort of sets in place and they understand what's going on with their own bodies and brain. It seems like a bad thing to do. I mean, I hate to say it, sue me, but
No, it does. Well, uh, good thing you're not in a position of authority in a school situation. But it just seems, Paul, like this is the stuff that he's accused of saying, and I guess it's has admitted to saying, they're just sort of run-of-the-mill denialism. He doesn't think that the educational material that supports the, gender identity, fluidity should be taught in schools. And okay, other people on the other side of the debate may disagree, and then somebody will make a decision as to what's included in the curriculum. It doesn't seem unhealthy to have that discussion, not to the tune of $750,000 anyway.
no, it's outrageous. Whatever
Right.
happened to free speech? You can only have free speech as long as we say what you want to believe, what
Yeah,
you believe. That's it's like the Donald Trump argument on the right,
yeah,
and the MAGA on the right.
yeah.
You know,
It's
when you're making that argument, look what's going on in the States. If Barack Obama or Joe Biden or any other president fell asleep in meetings, said he's sending a hospital ship to Greenland, or any number of other things, the Republicans would have gone crazy
yeah,
marching in the streets. But when it's their guy doing it, we don't hear anything, we don't see anything, we don't say anything.
yeah.
And the same is going on the left with this, the gender politics, and it's ridiculous. It's not a good thing because it's separating society. It's fracturing society at all levels. Nobody has any common knowledge or common values or anything. It's not a good thing.
No, it's really unhealthy to shut down that, it's it's a leading edge issue. If we can't talk about these things, then we're in trouble.
Yep.
Uh, Paul, a few other things before we bring in Dave Moore. There was a report. We've been following the evolution away from, well, it seemed to be evolving away from RCMP servers throughout the country. One of the places where this was sort of, the sharp end of the spear was in Surrey, British Columbia. And the Surrey Police is supposed to be taking over from the RCMP very soon. The police chief says and made a request apparently that because they are so swamped with these extortion cases that they would like to delay taking over from the RCMP because they have like 40 officers dedicated to this task force, and they're being told no, no, RCMP is on their way out. You're taking over. Make it work. Any idea what's going on there, or any thoughts on what's going on there?
Well, Surrey has taken over much of the municipal policing. The Surrey Police Force has taken over much of it, but not every sort of uh, borough or neighborhood in Surrey. Some of the outlying neighborhoods are still policed by the RCMP, and they're supposed to be moving in to take those over. But they're so swamped by these extortion cases. 35 suspected extortion cases in the first 20 days of 2026. And this is mostly, we call it South Asian now, but essentially, it's immigrants from India and crime gangs from India and that area that are involved in these extortions. That's not being racist. That's the facts.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of criminality going there. Then another wrench has been thrown in. Uh, they've been asked now to cut $70 million out of their budget.
Oh,
Well, they're trying to expand and cover this thing.
wow.
I see a lot of sort of RCMP duplicity in this as well. The RCMP always working behind the scenes to screw anyone who screws with them. And I don't have a lot of confidence in the police chief himself because he's a former Mountie. They hired a Mountie to take over this force, and maybe he's the good guy he says he is, or maybe he's being duplicitous too and acting, helping the Mounties through the back door. I don't know, but it all sort of smells.
It
All I know is that you've got to get the Mounties out of there and let the Surrey Police Force grow and become the police force it needs to be.
would it be in anybody's interest to see the extortion problem not being solved or not being addressed? I mean, it
Good point.
it's sort of in the RCMP's interest. You could think about it. If it creates chaos for the newly formed Surrey Police that's taking over, and things don't go so well initially, and maybe that discourages others from making the transition. But I don't know. That it's peculiar.
Here's the issue, the underlying issue. In a normal system, whether it's in the States or Canada, you have tiered policing. You have municipal policing, provincial or state policing, then federal policing. If this was happening in Ontario and a police force was being overwhelmed by, say, extortionists, they could call on their neighboring police forces to do joint and integrated sort of operations, but they could always rely on, especially in Ontario and Quebec, on the provincial police to come in. The RCMP
Yeah.
are the provincial police, but largely in name only. They are the provincial police, but they don't really act as a provincial police force. They act as a municipal police force here or there or whatever, and they don't have this separate sort of provincial presence to back up municipal police forces. I'm not seeing that. And I think that's one of the issues and a flaw in the whole system, the way it's structured, with the RCMP being the municipal, provincial, and federal police all in one body. A Mountie in Surrey would be, well, I'm a municipal policeman, I'm a 30% provincial policeman and a 10% federal policeman. It doesn't work.
No, no, you've got to be, you have to be one thing, typically to be effective. Yeah, that's well, I mean, we'll watch it. We're going to keep watching this story
Oh, for
out of
sure.
BC because that transition, if it doesn't go well, then that's going to affect how other transitions take place in the country,
As you said,
which
you've
is
got to be
really
one thing, which is
yeah,
a line from, I hate to say it, L. Ron Hubbard in Dianetics
yeah,
in the creation of Scientology. In their thinking, cult that they are,
yes,
that to be effective, a person must have a hat. The hat being a sole purpose and task. And that's what they do. You don't split them up into doing two or three different things. So there you go, from L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology. Everyone needs a hat.
Well, nobody will certainly accuse us of being conspiracy minded if we're quoting L. Ron Hubbard
Yes,
as Scientologist.
I'm not a big fan of Scientology, but I thought he was right about that one.
Hey man, you can get a good quote from anybody, right? If it's a
Yeah.
good quote, it works. Uh, all right, Paul, we got Dave Moore, but there was another case that's coming that's brewing out of Nova Scotia that we just want to touch on before we get there, which is one of Nova Scotia's wealthiest, or at least seemingly wealthiest, men. 77-year-old John Risley, founder of Clearwater Seafoods, owner for many years, sold it a few years ago. Now is an investor in all kinds of things, and he's in trouble. He seems to be, at least. He's got $1 billion in debt, financed at 20% credit
Well, no,
card
he's not
rate.
$1 billion in, his company,
Yeah,
his investment company, which he is the chairman and chief executive officer, has debts of 700 and roughly $750 million. And then he owes other people money. He borrowed $14 million from someone in Newfoundland, one of his buddies, at 14% interest. And if he missed a payment, it would go up by 3%. And it's now he owes 22 million at 20% on that alone. But the upside,
what's that?
he's got $14 million worth of art that he bought. So,
Well,
but he
must
can't
be
liquidate it.
quite an art lover. He's going to be looking maybe to liquidate a few things. He has a fishing place, I think, in Montana. He has a stable of horses. He has a mansion in Chester. He's got lots of stuff. Probably a neighbor of yours, I guess, Paul. But he also owes $331 million in taxes and has a further $90 million tax dispute, generally based around the question of whether these, hunting, fishing lodges, things that would seem to be recreation based are in fact part of his business and his operations and thus tax deductible in that sense.
Well,
Doesn't seem like it's going well.
before we move on, I live in Chester Basin, same telephone exchange as Chester. Uh, Risley's house was considered to be I don't know if it's changed. When I came here 25 years ago, the largest residence east of Montreal in Canada. He was like the godfather of Chester, and he's not one of those people who I mingled with because I have this thing about me, I guess, when the rich and powerful have something to hide, they don't deal with people like me once they figure out who I am. And I don't mind that. But I'm always suspicious of people who have, when I came here, Risley, I remember looking in the phone book, and Risley had 17 or 20 different phone numbers
Okay.
for every little cottage, the blueberry cottage, the cranberry cottage, the big barn, the horse barn, the cow barn. 17 or 20 phone numbers. And I thought this was outrageous. And then when you look back now on these allegations, they're saying he took $90 million out of one of the companies and used it for personal use to build houses. He was just building houses for girlfriends, giving them houses and crazy, crazy stuff. But he's considered, by the government of Nova Scotia and the municipal council and everything, the brightest man on the block and the man who should be respected and the man we should throw money at when he wants to start a business because he's rich.
This kind of thing happens. You see it around in different circumstances. So Risley's now investing in a giant wind farm that's supposed to, or he's trying to invest, or supposedly investing off the coast of Newfoundland that's supposed to fuel this green hydrogen revolution. That anyway, another scheme, right? But it's like, okay, he's 77 years old. It's almost like Frank Stronach, right, in Ontario. Like, okay, yeah, it's all coming, maybe it's all coming crashing down, but you've also got to enjoy all this for the last 40, 50 years. So is it justice? Who knows? But just to close off the John Risley story, Paul, he's lost a law firm. He was represented by Faskins out of Toronto, one of the top firms in the country. They've dropped him for unpaid bills, and now he's represented by McGinnis Cooper, one of the still top law firms in the region here. Coming before Justice John Keith, a former colleague of mine who's now a judge of the Supreme Court, who is a very smart guy and is going to be watching over this restructuring attempt. So we'll keep an eye on that too.
And last point on Risley, he said he and his brother-in-law Colin McDonald started out selling lobsters in the back of the truck and grew it to $1 billion business. I never bought that story. I'm sorry. I just whatever they did because they got a lot of government support and whatever. Like it just the economics of it sort of mystify me. And I
It,
just never bought the story.
it's
Sorry.
like, well, listen, if the government gives somebody $10 million, $20 million or more, yeah, they're going to make something happen with it. It's like, and
Yeah.
it doesn't make him a genius. It just makes him the guy that received the money. I mean, it's
Well,
like
he received the
trading
money and
places.
at the same time and built his empire on it, then doesn't want to pay the goddamn taxes.
Yeah. So,
Because I'm a libertarian.
yeah.
Yeah, well, you got there because the government put you there.
Yeah, one of those kinds. All
Yeah.
right, so let's grab Dave Moore here, Paul, and get some stories out of him and see where we go here now. There's Dave Moore coming in. Where's Dave going to be coming from today is the question. There's this, got him on screen, perhaps. All right.
Oh,
Hello,
good.
Dave.
Good afternoon.
All right, welcome back. Good to see you again.
Yeah, I was a little disappointed in their Canadian team, but I'll tell you, as a coach, you couldn't have asked for a more exciting game.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of chances to score there for the Canadians. It certainly could have went the other way if we could only live in that timeline.
Yeah, McKinnon could have pulled the trigger on that shot from the side instead of shooting into the side of the net. All
Yeah,
the what Bennett without his penalties. Anyway,
yeah,
still a hell of a game and a very proud Canadian, both for the women's team and the men's team. But the men's team was a knuckle biter all the way through.
yeah. The women's game we didn't really get to talk about yet here, Dave, but they were certainly not the favorites in that one and almost pulled it off. So that would have been an incredible win.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So we've got you on again, Dave, and we know we've got some more stories to get into. So maybe before a lot of our viewers will be familiar with you from previous appearances, but maybe give a quick little introduction and then we'll get into some of the content.
Dave Moore. I'm a longtime retired hockey coach and baseball coach, and I'm 30-year member of the RCMP. Retired, but I've had years of intelligence operations within the organization. There's a lot of things that I've observed and I've tried to make changes to over the years that have not been receptive by either the organization or those in government to try and make changes. I've observed an awful lot of things that you shake your head and wonder how is it they can let some of these things slip by. Uh, I've noticed in the last couple of years that they've made some drastic improvements in the ports security, in particularly in Halifax and Vancouver, where they were just lax before. In '97, Chrétien disbanded the ports police and basically left it to a private service, and the gates were wide open for all kinds of importations of illegal activity and drugs and so on. And sometimes in my travels around the world, I've run into some people who fill me in on ongoing events, and when I report them back to the government, they don't do anything. I was in Venezuela and Margarita Island, and a colonel from the military was telling me how they ship 2 shipments a week to Halifax. He even explained where the drugs are hidden in the shipments. So when I brought it to the attention of my supervisor, we're not getting involved. Stay out.
Before you get into this, Dave, before you
Yeah.
get into all this, I mean, the background for this is that we have various government people. The current public safety minister, for example, recently said, "We're sticking with the RCMP. We like the RCMP the way they are." And there's obviously all kinds of problems with the RCMP, and not the least of it being the lack of federal policing. And in the matter of the ports, you brought up Chrétien canceling the Ports Canada Police in 1997. Well, wouldn't and they're leaving it up to municipal police or the RCMP in their municipal capacity or provincial capacity to do this, augmented by the CBSA. Before we get into all the detail here, why can't the CBSA do the job that the ports police were doing?
Oh, so CBSA has authority for powers with regard to import-export, but they don't have authority under the Criminal Code of Canada. So you need to have an agency that has the powers of arrest and investigation under the auspices of the main issue is jurisdiction. So the structure of the RCMP is flawed because there aren't distinctive jurisdictions. A municipal police department overlaid by a provincial police department, overlaid by a federal police department. It's a hodgepodge mess right across our country. And until they sort that out, you can't even get going. Because I've always been told, well, we don't have the jurisdiction to do that investigation. What do you mean? As an RCMP, you have jurisdiction right across Canada, coast to coast to coast. Don't tell me that you can't go into Ports Canada and do an investigation on something that's going on there, or vice versa. But typically, if you got the municipal police department to say, okay, I need assistance from the provincial police department. Provincial turns around and says, okay, we need the federal department because they have assets that we could use to do an investigation. That's very similar to the States. The FBI has jurisdiction over a kidnapping, for instance. So in the case of Guthrie, you've got a chief of police who calls it a murder, doesn't call in the FBI. Where in fact, it was an FBI from the beginning, and it should have been called outright from the beginning. And so you get these jurisdictional battles between departments. They're running in independent silos where they should be running in overlap positions, assisting each other in the execution of their duties.
Okay.
So Dave, so what would be the problem in that case then, just on the ports, just a quick insert of why not give the arrest powers to the CBSA officials and officers?
I actually asked, I was Jean Chrétien's bodyguard, and I had a lot of time to talk to him about some issues when he came to Halifax. And I asked him point blank, why did you remove the ports police? One of my friends is a port police officer, and he said it had to do with the GNP. And then I found out later that they were transporting hazardous materials. They were shipping heavy water from the atomic nuclear facilities through Halifax out and they didn't want the ports police to be involved in that because they'd stop shipment. So I later on, several years later, I asked Premier McNeil, who had the same regurgitated response. Oh, you can't slow the shipments down because it'll affect our GNP. Well, that might be the political side of it, but I mean, when organized crime has got their foothold, I always reflect back to World War II when the president of the United States went to Charles Lucky Luciano and said, I need you to keep an eye on the ports, because he knew every trick that a magician knew to get stuff in and out of the port of New York City. And he wanted his guys to keep an eye on anything that was going on in the port and report it back because of a national security risk, because they're at war. So unfortunately, to get it right, you almost, in Canada, now I'm bearing in mind the mess up with the trucker situation, but you almost have to put a wartime security protocol in place to tie up all the loose ends with regard to the ports. It's not a matter of slowing down the gross national product. It's a matter of, now that they realize that the lack of that check and balance, if you will, has caused us nothing but problems. You would describe it as the horse has left the barn. Now you're closing the gate behind the horse when our country's messed up from coast to coast because of all the drugs and all of the importations and whatever. And then so to flow backwards, you have to have a structural map. So for instance, if I used Rotterdam, if you use best business practices, Rotterdam was the worst port of drug infiltration and human trafficking. They went complete extreme security at the Rotterdam port. So there's AI initiatives that are there. They have tracking devices on every container. There's not even any humans that touch the containers. It's completely robotic. So if you remove the organized crime element, so in Halifax, we had the gantry operator, Paul Arthur, who was part of the Hells Angels, controlling.
Whoa. Before you get into that,
yeah,
explain you were on the ground on the ports when you were in Halifax and a member of the RCMP. You did some investigations in the ports, I understand.
correct.
And this leads up to your knowledge of what was going on in the ports too. You had firsthand knowledge.
Correct. Plus, there was a major commercial crime operation within the RCMP. It's old news, where they took down the organized crime network that was working in the port. So the crane operator had full knowledge of what every container contained, and there was just millions and millions of dollars worth of stuff disappearing. So a good example is the 40-foot container of the quarters that were destined for Newfoundland all of a sudden got lost in transit at the Halifax port. How's that possible? The gantry operator knows exactly which container has the load of quarters, and he loads those into a truck and sends them out. And so what I'm saying is there's 20 different tricks in the book every day of the week to try and circumvent authorities. When you only have one gate exiting, or you're only x-raying 1% of the cargo to manifest, then 90% of it can slip out the back door. And then
I asked you, Paul Arthur then was connected to
the Hells Angels, and he was convicted of his crime. And when he did his time, when he got back out, they hired him again as the crane operator. So they didn't learn anything from it. And it was a massive commercial crime operation that took him down in the organization, but you're just putting a pinprick in it. You have to do an overall structural security. And the only way I can suggest doing it in Canada is if they adopted a wartime security protocol. Nothing gets in and out of the ports of Halifax unless we know where it is, what it is, where it's going, who's involved. But having said that, you run the risk of the government bringing things through the port that are not prepared to tell the citizens. Like you've got hazardous material, nuclear waste coming through the port of Halifax being shipped out. That's the main reason why Chrétien changed the rule and got rid of the ports police. He didn't want the ports police sticking their nose into a change in policy where they were selling our heavy water to get rid of it somewhere else. They used to pour it down old mines, bore wells that were 2,000 feet deep. Instead, they shipped it out of country. Well, there just happened to be in 2014 a container that dropped from the gantry and split one of those wide open. It was the liquid cooling that actually leaked all over the port, but 500 employees disappeared off the docks, and the poor fire department that came in to figure out what was going on had no clue what they were shipping.
Dave,
So,
this all kind of connects. We started off the show mentioning the U.S. Supreme Court of decision striking down the Trump tariffs, which he had tried to enact based on the International Emergency Economic Powers Act.
right,
So, in other words, to say, well, because fentanyl's coming in over the border, there's drugs are coming in, things are coming in illegally through the border, through the ports, that this is an emergency. Well, it didn't work under that piece of legislation that he chose to use, but it is an issue, isn't it, for international relations and many other things if we don't get these ports straightened away.
absolutely. So, we've known for years that the cocaine comes up from Venezuela on the East Coast. And there's even been examples under Operation Pipeline, which is a U.S. Pipeline operation where they're profiling drivers of cars. They'll get a guy in the back seat from Venezuela, the driver's from Colombia, and the other guy's from Mexico. And they come up to get a load of cocaine, and they put it in the spare tire of the car, and then they'll get pulled over and they'll search that vehicle. And sure enough, there'll be 5 kilos of cocaine. Well, it's coming from Canada. It's not coming from the United States. It's for a while there, they had, as an example, the ships would have metal plates put on them on the inside of the ship that were magnetized with a plate on the outside of the ship with a load of drugs outside on the ship. And what they would do is they'd come up the coast, and at a particular Lawrence location, altitude, longitude, they would turn the magnet off of the metal, and the drop shipment would go to the bottom. They would notify the drug dealer where they can locate their shipment of drugs, and they come out and pick it up. And when there was a situation in Halifax where a boat was supposed to have a shipment, very same type of setup on the bottom of the hull, and one of our RCMP officers got killed. He came up without putting his hand over his head, and he was only in 12 feet of water. Hit his head, knocked himself out, and because there's no visibility in the cesspool in our harbor, nobody saw him, and he died. So the
I
point
never
I'm
knew
trying,
that's how he died. I remember the
Yeah.
story of him dying, but I don't remember the any details of that kind of an operation, or did I miss it?
well, normally you die with a dive plat. You're going down with a dive platform. There's two people on the boat, and you've got one guy on one side of the sled, the other guy on the other side, and you're using your arm to feel because you can't see anything. You're in pitch black water, even though it's 12 feet deep. So you're trying to feel the hull. So they displaced the quadrant, east, west, north, south, individually on the boat, and left one guy down the middle. Normally you have a dive partner, and if the guy knocks himself out, I can bring him ashore and resuscitate him. As long as he's beside me and I reach over to feel that he's there, or if he disconnects from the sled, which is like a set of handlebars, I know he's gone because my sled's tilting to my side from the weight. I got to go find him, drag him back up on shore, and I could resuscitate him. Well, that didn't take place. And because of that, one of the members died in the execution of that particular drug operation. So they've now got some remote control devices that they use in the port that examine the underneath part of the hull. So, but the criminals are as smart as the police. Sometimes they're 2, 3 steps ahead. So when one doesn't work, they go on to a new technique. And so they've got some new AI procedures that have been adopted in Halifax Harbor, one of which is from a company in Dartmouth that examines the underneath part of the hull. But there's no humans attached. It's a drone that goes underwater and examines the ships. Well, the reason they went that way is because those shipments were coming in on the hulls of the ship, not realizing that for the most part, those loads have already been dropped off offshore on the way to the destination. They're not going to they're not stupid enough to come into port with a whole bunch of drugs attached to the hull of the ship. They're going to drop it along the way, and it's up to the other guys to go pick it up. So for every measure,
You'd want a pretty strong magnet for that kind of situation, I guess, if you're on
yeah,
the drug dealer side of the equation.
absolutely. But so for every measure you put in place, there's a countermeasure. Now, getting back to your question, Adam, with regard to the tariffs, it's a bonehead move on the part of the president. But if you looked in terms of Reagan era, where he announced the war on drugs, And they actually brought in a whole system of policing involving that, because they end up getting 52 police officers in the Miami Police Department. They're all on the take, bringing in cocaine and getting paid to look the other way. So there are initiatives that you can take, and that's what I mean by getting a wartime platform, is that you have to take this seriously and put measures in place once and for all to tidy this up. And they will always try to outsmart you and be 1 or 2 steps ahead. But if they hire intelligent enough people or get proper informants, the informant for 11 years in Halifax was telling me everything that was going on in the port, everything. And I'd bring it to my superiors, they wouldn't do a thing. We're not getting involved. It included human trafficking. His job when he first started out was bringing barrels into a container so that the women that were trapped in the container could use it to go to the bathroom.
Why wouldn't they get involved? Why wouldn't they get involved?
The answer I got was keep out. So I would do surveillance up on the hill in behind the dealership there. There's a dealership right at the corner, and sit there for hours on my time off and just watch them. I would watch the gantry guy put a load over top of the fence to a waiting trailer. So I'm going, he didn't go through security checkout. What's going on there? But anyway, the guy would tell me of all the different things that he was involved with over the years. He was just a gopher guy. His father worked there for years and years, and he had a part-time job trying to do stuff over the years. And all those years, he would tell me different things that these people would try nefariously, criminally, and sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. They would tell me about the disposition that they're prepared to get up to 10% loss on the shipments, how they stack the ships so that if they wanted to, they could turn hard right at sea and have the top containers fall off the boat. Those were the ones containing certain things. I said, come on, how do you do it? Well, we don't put the straps on the upper portions. There's big straps that go from container bottom to container top. Well, they didn't put them on purpose. And they'd load them to the one side of the ship. So a hard turn stern or hard turn aft, the things would fall off, and they'd call the guy to come out with the barge and pick them up.
Dave,
Totally
I've seen L.A. Confidential and other movies of that nature, and usually if the boss man isn't interested in that investigation, by the time the movie wraps up, you've figured out that he's involved,
yeah, sometimes,
some way or
but
another.
I've just over my 30 years, I've brought situations to the hierarchy that they just can't handle. They just don't have the scope, the gray matter to be able to, and I don't mean that as an insult, but they're not operational. So I could give you hundreds of examples, whether it's small scale stuff or large scale stuff. It's just beyond their scope of gray matter. But when they're told by government, it's coming from the top down, stay away from the ports. We don't want you there. Well, okay, one of them's a female RCMP officer's daughter that got kidnapped off Quinpool Road. I don't know if she was among the women that were in that container while I was being told that there were women there, that he was bringing in the food and taking out the urine and feces. But hey, you could at least send somebody down to check it out, not make me look bad because the guy's reporting the information. So there were measures in place. The x-ray they had at the time was a full wall x-ray, but it was one dimensional. It had no depth to it. So if you put tinfoil up on the inside of the container, the x-ray machine doesn't work. And the other part that was lined with, they did it for a couple of different reasons. The RFIs on the vehicles don't transmit when you've got tinfoil on the inside of the container ship. So they tinfoil the bottom. It's just stick on tinfoil on the sides of the corrugated thing. But those heavy, the Land Rovers and all the expensive vehicles that are going out through the port, they've all got GPS trackers on them. So sometimes a manufacturer will have more than one. So to make sure they go into an environment where you can't transmit the RFI signal. So again, they're one step up. They're a little smarter than your average bear, but for us to do best practices, you can certainly have a look at Rotterdam and see what they've done. They've completely eliminated human interaction with the cargo. So, and they track that cargo. There is this thing called the curvature of the earth, and your signals don't transmit over the curve. So your satellite, those they call it ghosting or shutting off your transponder on the boat. So they'll turn off the transponder, and that boat disappears off the face of the earth until they turn it back on again. Well, in the meantime, they dump their PCB contaminants and their garbage overboard, and they redirect cargo, or they might dump some cargo on purpose off the side and then jig-jag to go back into another location and then turn the thing back on. Oh yeah, we're just having a glitch. Yeah, I'm sure. So until you track some of the nefarious activity that these are doing, even the more modern AIs, they do track it. But as soon as you turn off the transponder, the AI is useless. And there's no secondary tracking device because of the curvature of the earth.
Something
So,
you said earlier, you alluded to earlier, is interesting. You said during your career, you're aware of like Venezuelan gangs bringing shipping directly to Halifax and cartels basically operating in Canada back then. And this is exactly what President Trump has been saying all along, that
correct.
he's been
He's
saying
not,
this.
he's not wrong,
He's
because
not wrong about that.
Rotterdam, that's what their problem was. It was Venezuelan cocaine. It was coming up the coast to them, and they rerouted it over to Canada.
So it's coming into Canada, but there seems to be no acknowledgement to this day that the cartels are operating in Canada.
I mean, you'd have to be willfully blind not to think that these guys are not operating. And it's not just the mafia and the Hells Angels and the triads in Vancouver. There's literally hundreds of organized crime networks operating. Every country that has immigrants into Canada, they'll have gangs, and they're going to find some nefarious way to make money. And so the distribution of the drugs isn't just to Montreal through the Hells Angels. It's right across Canada in many distributions. From the West Coast, they've got the liquid drums coming in from China on the boat. You need that chemical to make fentanyl. You mix it with the dry powder that comes in, but the chemicals come from China. So they should be tracking that. But my understanding is there are secondary ports on the Vancouver side that they can offload this stuff with absolutely no customs and excise people there at all, either before the main disembarkation or before. And some of these containers I was telling you about, they had a load that went on, and the secondary load were refrigerators, but the primary load were barrels of chemicals. They made them fall off the ship on purpose near the Vancouver coast. So the particular area can't be gotten to easily by land, very difficult to get there by boat, by ship, because of the rocky shoreline. But the fridges all ended up banged up on the shoreline, but the guys end up retrieving with a barge the container that had the liquid chemicals in it. So you're sitting there going, okay, you try to stay one step ahead of these guys, but their motivation is pure money. So sometimes our own government steps on our own feet. Like, I'm sure Prime Minister Chrétien had his rationale for doing what he did, but he opened up the floodgates for everything else to come in, and not realizing that there has to be some measure of check and balances at all the ports, not just one. I'm not sure you'll see some in Sydney. There are boats that go through from Halifax to Sydney. Most of the understanding of the Sydney ones are raw materials that get loaded up onto the ships there. But we've had major shipments come into Sydney, and we've had to have a whole drug operation go down to Sydney offload. So it's happening all over. It's just a question,
One story I liked about you, sorry to interrupt you there, Adam, but one story I liked that I thought was very telling and simple to tell was you followed money when you were doing surveillance, going to a building in Dartmouth, and there's also a story about a pawn shop you were investigating.
correct?
Are those related? But the money going to this building on Wise Road, what happened there?
So my informant was tasked to take 4 hockey bags full of money to the building at 99 Wise Road. So what he did was he got a call up. He's a teenager at this time. He got a call in the morning to put his hockey jersey on, show up for work. So he goes to work and he gets 4 duffel bags, hockey bags, and hockey sticks. They pile them in the back of the pickup truck, and he drives to the address on Wise Road. They unload the duffel bags, but he's happy because he gets to keep the $100 hockey sticks. He goes in the building with the bag and the hockey stick on the handle, and he comes out with the hockey stick. So a few years later, he tells 3 years after that, he told me about 5-gallon pails of paint, but this time they told him to wear blue overalls as though he was a painter going into the same place. And it was 5-gallon pails sealed with the plastic lid on them, and he had to take 8 of those inside the building. Well, years go by and we complete the investigation on Paul Arthur, and part of that investigation, he went down to Virginia to buy a motorhome. And when we interviewed the guy from the motorhome place, Paul Arthur showed up with 2 5-gallon pails with money in them, and the money was moldy inside the 5-gallon pails to pay the $300,000 for the motorhome. It was the same time frame. I didn't know at the time. I had to back check the timeline, but it was at the same time. So money was being laundered at the same time through these 5-gallon pails, and Paul Arthur's cut on it was obviously a couple of barrels of the cash that were being transmitted.
And it was a lawyer's office.
I believe so, yeah.
I hate to say that to you, Adam.
I recognize the address when you mentioned it, though. That's the Boyne Clark building. It used to be in it there anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I did go to my supervisors, and he said, "What do you want me to do?" I said, "Well, they're money laundering, clearly." I could never tell him to get me something because it was always haphazard what they were having him do. But obviously I was looking for an accountant in town. Who's the accountant that's handling the payoffs? Because somebody's dealing with it. And we had out in Timberley, we had 3 guys on the go doing car break-ins. Simple young teenagers breaking into cars, stealing stuff. And they happened to break into this Jetta with a duffel bag in the trunk. And the duffel bag had cash and diamonds in it. And as it turned out, the guy was the accountant for the Hells Angels. And the word was out that they were going to kill the 3 kids. So I had to go try and chase down the kids and find out who they were and advise them they're about to be killed. And when I went to the first house out in Prospect, somebody got there before me and put a bullet through the front window of the house that lodged in the bedroom of the parents. So there are people that are in the know, and believe me, organized crime members can find out stuff very quickly, much more quickly than the police. But there was a situation where I had to advise these criminals, the young kids, that their life is going to be ended, period. There is no out. And one of them took off to London, Ontario, ended up getting picked up by the police in London, Ontario, and was found dead in his cell overnight. Guess who did that?
Yeah, really.
So this is how serious these things can be. And so the part of it is you either leave organized crime alone and let them do their stuff and live a very, wonderful life. Or if you're going to get into it, you can't do it alone. You need the support of an entire department and enough planning to be able to do a 200-member takedown 6 months later. But if they're not receptive to any of these things that are going on, like human trafficking, when one of your own members' daughters gets kidnapped from the street and the guy's screaming bloody murder to do something, and you have information like that, you act on that immediately. But again, I've had scenarios, Lower Sackville, I had a guy who he died of AIDS, full-blown AIDS in 1995, and his household possessions went to his brother in Lower Sackville who had a teenage son. The guy was fully blind and was injecting himself with liquid morphine. The kid from the house took the 2 bottles of liquid morphine and was spooning it out in the elementary schoolyard to kids. So I got him and I was able to get the bottles. One was still full and the other one was half empty. Seized those bottles, brought them to the detachment, and I got a list of the parents who those children belong to. And I went to my boss and said, we got to have these parents in because they've potentially come into contact with AIDS, full-blown AIDS. The guy died of AIDS. And the boss said, get those bottles out of my office. This is not a police matter. Well, if it's not a police matter, whose matter is it?
Yeah, really.
So I literally, I've never been afraid to speak my mind. And I said, you can fire me, but those parents will be coming to this detachment and I'll be advising them that their child came into contact with AIDS. So in the meantime, I contacted the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, and I wanted to know if a morphine suspension could hold the AIDS virus. It's a liquid suspension. He's just injecting it, putting it in his leg, and then the skin that's in the needles getting purged back in the bottle, and again and again and again. So is there a potential that there's a live virus in that open bottle? So I wanted to pass that information along to the parents. As it turned out, and back in the day, the way that AIDS worked was you got sick right away with flu-like symptoms, and then you didn't get sick for years. One of those 20 children had AIDS. Oof. But the decision for that detachment commander to not want to get involved with it because it's beyond me and it's not a police matter. Well, whose matter is it?
No, so, it's not a very courageous approach.
Now, most guys having to be up against that moral dilemma, I'm not going to fight my boss. I want to get promoted. If the boss says, hey, leave it, take those bottles out, throw them in the ditch somewhere or whatever, you'd be surprised how many guys would do that.
No, I'm not surprised, Dave, because we keep hearing it, but we're we're lucky, and our audience is lucky that that you're of the opposite nature. That when things happen, that you're outspoken and that you do what you can to do something about it. We're running long on time here. I could listen to these stories all day, and I'm sure others could. But I was just kind of reflecting back on the ports discussion for a second, and it seems like, whenever there's money and, an opportunity that people are going to take advantage of it and try to get in there. I guess the alternative, if we're following the Rotterdam example, is to uh, allow the AI platforms and their designers to come in and take over. I mean, there's more money in that too, I guess, but at least it avoids or may thwart some of the criminal activity otherwise.
Well, ironically, in the last 8 months, there's been an extreme increase in the AI in Halifax ports. They've brought in a department, COVE it's called, which is Center for Ocean Venture, has got an operation under AI. That one, that's what I was telling you about. They call it beyond the visual line of sight to go over the horizon because the water's curved, and it detects those boats that turn off their transponders, and it detects if the boat is leaching PCB contaminants out in the ocean or whatever. It becomes a different color than the ocean around it. So there are technologies that are being advanced. One of the guys that was a ports police officer, he actually he ran a company called International Disposal down on the Dartmouth waterfront. He was a ports officer, and he realized that they were paying $50,000 per ship when the ship went into New York Harbor to get the PCP contaminants out from the diesel engines and the garbage and the fecal matter. So he did it locally in Halifax for half the price, cleared the ship with a cleanliness certificate so it could go into the port of New York. Now that's a business opportunity, but still, he felt, I spoke to him at length about the operations at the Ports Canada. I knew him for many years, and he said it was pointless. They would out-trick us. They're 2 or 3 exits, and they'd have us set up on one, and all the illegal gains were being taken out the back door they knew exactly what containers were going out. And we talked about Banachek, and some of these containers never had anything in them to begin with. They came to Halifax under a predisposition of insurance collection. There was never anything in them. They were shipped empty. So they show up to the end user, hey, there's nothing in it. Oh, okay, I guess we'll collect the insurance. So, yeah. So,
well, I think
it's good.
The natural question is, you're talking about using AI and things like that now, and do we need ports police, or are you just going to let it AI take care of it?
Unless you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound, like you're going to do in Rotterdam, and completely alleviate the human contact with these containers. It's robotic and it's AI. Then anything less than that with human interaction, you're going to have corruption and greed. So you have to, sorry to say it, shit or get off the pot. You're either going to do it right or not at all, because they're just going to find a way to circumvent the situation. But if you've got those trackers internationally, so the latest thing that has come out is the AI tracking of the actual individual box. It has a sensor in it for humans, for CO2, for heat, for all kinds of sensors are actually in each container. And if it's a laser AI system, if the container is moved or the door is opened, whether you cut the hinges off it or open the lock, it automatically sets the sensor off.
Wow.
It updates the AI program automatically that there's a problem with that particular load. So that's what they're doing in Rotterdam. And like I said, they've got innovation in Halifax, and you kind of have to absorb the big pill. But even at that, there's gaps it's not foolproof. There are gaps. But the biggest one is to remove human contact with any of the shipment. You can't help when there's a fraudulent shipment, there's nothing in that container. But you could track those cars leaving. They only do, at the time I last inquired, they were doing 2% X-ray of the cargo leaving and coming. But every cargo should match the manifest that comes with the cargo. So if there's an X-ray, the new ones they have are 3D X-rays. You can see depth with the X-ray. And if that item, there's 2 Land Rovers in there, and there's supposed to be a thing of toilet paper on the manifest, well, you got a problem. That thing gets pulled over and you deal with it. But
Well, that's great, Dave. All right, so we're gonna sorry, we could keep on going on and on. I guess we've got our lessons for this week, and we'll I'm sure have lots more to talk about another time because it's it seems like that's the next move on the government or the good guy side, you might think, and then the criminals will have to develop their next move after that if those kind of AI protocols and systems get implemented.
they call it a built-in redundancy. So they're layers of checks and balances with built-in redundancy. If I take one system out, the other one's going to pick it up. That's what you have to do. And they're not aware of the other system. So you try to trick it, but it's like 2 GPSs. One's wired into the fuse panel of a brand new Land Rover, and the other one's up underneath the dash. So the bad guys take the one out from underneath the dash, but they were able to track those cars leaving Halifax and ending up in Africa, or the ones coming out of Montreal. Same thing. The network television traced the vehicles to a compound in Africa with 30 vehicles from Canada, from Montreal. So
last question. I just need a yes or no answer. You talked about heavy water and hazardous waste being shipped through the ports unknowingly, so going through city streets and stuff like that. Is that still going on?
it's still going on today. It would come in by railway and then off the railway into the shipping and out by ship to its end destination. There was a period of time where they were dumping it in the ocean, but that stopped from my understanding. But now there are countries that get paid by Canada to bring in the nuclear waste and store the nuclear waste underground. They typically go 2,000 meters underground to store this, and it's got a 10,000 year retention for it until the radiation dissipates. But my issue is, okay, we know that the incident occurred in 2014. The fire department wasn't even aware of what this was all about. So the government didn't provide the manifest to at least let the citizens know that this is a regular practice now. They used to get rid of it out west or near Chalk River, but now they don't do it. Now they're shipping it outside the country. So the question is, if there were security measures in place and secretive government operations took place, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But it's Swiss cheese, and anybody can get access to this if they happen to know the right container, whether it's coming off the train or going onto the container, and then make a dirty bomb. out of the heavy water. So you got to be smarter than that. You've got to take a little bit better approach. And that's why I say during wartime, you would be shipping out munitions that would have all kinds of security overlays to make sure that went where it was supposed to go. Well, why aren't we doing that with the heavy water? It makes no sense. Just
That's a
have it.
good place right there.
All right.
Yeah.
Great, Dave. Thank you very much for joining us again. We appreciate your time and expertise, and we'll get you back before long, no doubt.
Okay. Good talking to you. Have a great
Okay,
day.
Good.
great
Thank
stuff.
you, Dave.
Bye now.
All right, Paul. Well, that was took our mind off the game for a while. That was good. Yeah, any closing thoughts or things you're looking at this week ahead?
The one thing I'm looking at, a lot of stuff going on in First Nations communities right across the country with all the various problems. But one thing that popped up, I was looking at the shooting of a story the other day of Bronson Paul in New Brunswick on January 18th, shot in his kitchen.
Yeah,
And apparently the whole thing was recorded on a police um, body cam.
yeah.
The sister of Bronson Paul says he wasn't armed, he was shot in his kitchen. And the RCMP seems to be saying we don't want to release the body cam imagery because it'd be too traumatizing. Why the hell do we have body cams if we can't see what was on them?
If we're critical sometimes, but if this was the US, we would see that body cam footage already. I mean, it's necessary. That's an explosive or potentially explosive situation there within the community and around First Nations, and I think that needs to be publicized.
I think in the future, I'd like to get someone from the First Nations on to talk about the various problems they're having in all the communities, but and problems with policing as well. I mean, there's
Yeah.
problems with criminality, but something like this, when you have body cams, they're there for a reason. Disclosure. That's what
Yes.
it's about.
Yeah, I know in just the regular course of cases, it takes a while sometimes to get the body cam footage because the excuse being that they need to vet out anybody that's not involved in the investigation and they need to blur out their faces or any of that kind of stuff. Just release the footage, it's just an excuse. So,
It's an excuse. And as I said, privacy laws are used by the government to hide
yeah.
information.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we'll leave it there, folks. Thanks again, everybody, for watching and for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye. Thank you.